It's a fundamental right necessary for the protection of our nation and our liberty. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Our founding fathers wrote those words on purpose, not because Revolutionary War muskets were different from modern firearms, but because they understood that without safety, we have no freedom. Without a means to curtail the power of government, we the people have no power. Yet in the wake of the Orlando terror attack, liberal politicians seem ready to send our Second Amendment rights to the chopping block. Fortunately, some members of Congress are willing to fight. Take a look.
Over 15 years ago, it's been about 16, maybe 17 years ago, right here on the streets of Nashville, right on the campus of Vanderbilt, I was assaulted by 3 young men. I was beat up, my cheekbone was broken, they ruptured a disc in my back, and they tried to get me in a car, which the police told me had they gotten me in the car, I would have never come back.
Joining me now is Second Amendment attorney and legislative advocate Alex Kincaid. Alex, thanks for coming on.
Hi, Liz. Thanks for having me.
All right, we just saw that video. That was Congresswoman Diane Black from Tennessee. She was talking about her personal experience with being assaulted. And Alex, I want to ask you this. We talked about guns last week, but I want to bring it up again because 200,000 times a year, women defend themselves against sexual abuse with firearms. The Second Amendment is personal to women, and I don't understand why, in the midst of gun control fights in Congress, like we're experiencing right now in the wake of the Orlando terror attack, why isn't that a central talking point? Because that's what matters to women, our safety.
It absolutely should be a central talking point. And the number of women who are involved in justifiable homicides using a firearm to defend themselves has doubled since 2008. So if you look up the statistics, women are starting to fight back, and they are saving their own lives by engaging in their right to keep and bear arms. It's just astounding that this doesn't come forward. All we hear about is how guns take lives, how guns are killing people all by themselves, and we're overriding and completely forgetting about the fact that firearms help us protect people, and they save our lives, and they save this country and our freedom.
Right, and I feel like a lot of times our legislators talk about guns as they pertain to men almost. They talk about hunting. You don't want to lose your right to go hunting. You don't want to lose your gun collections. But to be honest, a lot of young women in my generation, because the idea of losing our liberty isn't necessarily real to us because we've grown up in a nation that we've always been afforded every freedom that we wanted, the message of, oh, you need to maintain your right to bear arms so that government doesn't overreach their authority, that doesn't resonate, but safety does.
Safety does. And I have had several women who are judges contact me in the last couple of months telling me how unsafe they feel. Why? Because courts are gun-free zones, and they have to work in the court system. They're targets, and their right to protect themselves has been removed. They're told they have to rely on the government. And one of these judges said, you know what? The Department of Homeland Security issued this little brochure that tells us to hide under our desks. And in the case of an active shooter, they're telling me to sit there and throw things at the person that is shooting at me. That's what I'm supposed to do in my defense.
It's unbelievable. That's the same as the guidelines that we saw on some college campuses that said, oh, if young women are sexually assaulted in the gun-free zones on campuses, they should urinate on themselves or vomit to turn off their attacker so the attacker doesn't want them sexually anymore. It's absolutely ridiculous.
It is. And women are starting to wisen up. More and more women are getting, of course, in the gun industry. We hear that every day. Women are training, women are learning about firearms. And just like these judges, they want to be able to defend themselves. So this should be a central talking point. And thank you so much for bringing it up.
Right, and it's absolutely not at this point. Now, Alex, I talked to John Lott. He's the author of More Guns, Less Crime. I talked to him earlier this week, and we were talking about legislative solutions, because I think when there is a terror attack like in Orlando, such as there was, and it was a weapon, a rifle, used in that, people automatically, our emotional knee-jerk reaction is to want to do something. We don't want that to happen again. We want to pass a law to protect it. People as individuals even feel willing to give up some of their freedoms in order to protect someone else. And that's a good part of human nature. That's our compassionate part. It just is short-sighted, as it were. But what can we do legislatively? We see what's going on in the Congress right now, especially in the House of Representatives. A lot of people are worried that the GOP is going to cave to that emotion or the emotional pressure. But what can we do to prevent this from happening?
Well, you know, you and I discussed already, gun-free zones need to go. They're killing zones. We know that. And the Obama administration has been really big on loopholes. They toss these words around in order to get people really excited and have almost a gimmick with their proposed legislation. We have gun trust loopholes. We have gun show loopholes. Now we have this so-called terrorist loophole, when the only terrorist loophole is the Obama administration itself. And if we would target the people who are pulling the trigger and killing others wrongfully, we would have a solution to our problem. So legislatively, the gun-free zones absolutely need to go. People need to be able to defend themselves. We're seeing the courts, divide this country further on Second Amendment issues with respect to whether we can carry outside our home. There was a big case that came out of the Ninth Circuit recently that said Second Amendment doesn't protect you and your ability to carry a concealed firearm. Sorry.
Right. That's right here in California. You have to have a quote unquote justifiable reason that you are in imminent danger to be able to conceal carry instead of just exercising your Second Amendment right as it's written in the Constitution. Alex, I want to target in on something that you just said, and that's the terrorist loophole. For those viewers who might not know what she's talking about, that is the idea that people on a terror watch list or suspected terrorists are or are not allowed to purchase guns. And the slippery slope here, I think, is that there are people that are on terror watch list, or being investigated by the FBI or suspects who are innocent. They haven't been proven guilty. They haven't been convicted. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, because in one sense, it seems logical to ban anyone who's under investigation for terrorism from being able to purchase a weapon. On the other hand, what about the deprivation of the rights of the people who are innocent? How do we balance that?
Exactly. And it's a difficult standard to come up with. However, we know of at least 4 congressmen who have been on the watch list, one or the other, the no-fly or the terror watch list. And they certainly were not terrorists. It was just that the government wanted to speak with them about something related to terrorist activity. So you can easily be put on this list, and delegating that authority to someone like the Attorney General, as was proposed in Dianne Feinstein's bill last week, is certainly not the solution. We have a system in this country, and it allows law enforcement to investigate, and if they can make an arrest, they will do it. But if we don't have the evidence, we have a problem. So going anything beneath due process is problematic, because you or what if someone came into my office and consulted with me and they were a terrorist, and then the FBI wanted to talk to me about it and I get placed on a list? That means I lose my Second Amendment protection. That's
right,
not
and if
what
you
this
had a
country
terrorist
is about.
consult with you, you'd probably need it more than ever. And there's no recourse, by the way, once you're on these lists, whether it's the no-fly list, whether it's on the terror watch list. There's nothing you can do as a citizen of the United States to get yourself off of it. There's no recourse that you have. So Alex, one more question. Let me ask you this. Congress has been debating and voting on these various gun control bills, most of them presented by liberals that would infringe on our rights. But there was one Republican presented bill that failed in the United States Congress this week. And that was a bill that would allow the FBI to be notified if a person on the terror watch list tried to purchase a gun. Now, this isn't necessarily banning that person. It's just allowing a notification from that gun shop, from that gun manufacturer, whoever is selling the gun, to that individual who is either currently on the terror watch list or has been in the last 5 years. Why didn't Democrats pass that?
Well, why didn't they? That's a really good question, because it wasn't what they wanted. That was a bill that could have worked. It really was problematic from my perspective for several reasons, though, because what it did was it allowed the FBI 3 days to go to court and show a judge that they had probable cause. If law enforcement has probable cause, they're going to make an arrest. So apparently if someone's on the watch list and they haven't been arrested, they don't have the evidence to proceed with that case. So, it's just an inability of these two parties to come together and come up with some kind of a standard that can be reviewed by a court to when you put somebody on the list and how that person gets off. So,
right. And just to loop it back to what you said earlier, I think that what we're dealing with right now, this is the symptomatic manifestation of a much larger problem. We wouldn't even have to be dealing with these nitty-gritty, who should be able to buy a gun, who shouldn't be able to buy a gun, if we were dealing with the problem as it began, and that's radical Islamists, the terrorists entering our country and wanting to kill us. And if we took a step back and started addressing that, all these gun issues would solve themselves and we wouldn't be having these arguments. Alex, unfortunately, we are out of time for today, but thanks again for coming on. Coming up next, Donald Trump's blistering critique of Hillary Clinton's record as Secretary of State, possibly his heaviest hit yet against the presumptive Democratic nominee. Megan Barth is here next.